Hi, my name is Josie South, and I will be discussing trends in Southern Hemisphere fish invasions and proposing a route forward for collaborative opportunities within the Global South. Numbers of invasive species are continuing to rise globally. In the next 50 years, Africa is predicted to have a relative increase of 49% in fish invasions and a 16% relative increase in South America. Due to geographical biases in funding and research priorities, the majority of invasion work has been completed in the Northern Hemisphere. This often results in conclusions and recommendations which don't translate into the context of the Neo and Afrotropics. We pulled together a group to work out where there are shared threats and opportunities for collaboration across 3 case study countries: Argentina, Brazil, and South Africa. We first identified shared fish species and their invasion status in each country, of which there are 11 in total. Invasive species accounted for 72% of the shared species pool in each country assessed. All 3 countries had at least one species as a native, and 2 of these, the African sharp-toothed catfish and the vermiculated sailfin catfish, also have extralimital invasive populations in both Brazil and South Africa. In this case, we included the extralimital species in the analysis, but defined them here as natives. All identified fishes are present in South Africa in some manner. We considered both currently invasive populations and species which are known to be present in the wild and thus able to become invasive in the future. The intention is to create a roadmap for future collaboration, and this should include addressing species which don't become invasive in one country but are invasive elsewhere. The shared species pools showed a sigmoidal accumulation curve in both South Africa and Argentina, with Argentina's first introduction date 45 years after South Africa. Brazil, on the other hand, had a logistic accumulation curve of a plateau between 1913 and 1952. 36% of introductions into Argentina were from a Eurasian origin, while Brazil received most from North America and an equal amount from everywhere else. South Africa received most from North America and Africa. In Argentina and Brazil, introductions via aquaculture and fisheries enhancement vectors dominate, with an emerging threat of aquarium trade species in all 3 countries. Angling species were overrepresented in South Africa as a legacy result of British colonial stocking practices. Vector temporal trends show that the angling vector plateaus off, likely related to legislation and greater awareness of invasive species by anglers. The aquaculture and fisheries enhancement vector introduction show an almost linear rise, but the shared species records stop in the 70s, once again likely related to a shift in native species fisheries as a result of greater awareness. Aquarium trade introductions appear to be increasing with time and can be expected to rise rapidly as research and detection levels intensify across the regions. There was a significant association between vectors and donor countries when stratified by recipient. Data indicates that angling vectors are associated with North American species, the aquarium trade vector is associated with South American species, and the aquaculture and fishery enhancement vector is associated with Eurasian species. Knowing this can help prioritize legislation and biosecurity protocols. Quick look at policy trends between the countries shows some obvious differences which are promoting different introduction patterns. All 3 countries suffer from deficits in budget and implementation capacity. South Africa has strong invasive legislation overall, as does Argentina. However, Argentina suffers from a decentralization of decision-making. Brazil, on the other hand, has a problematic policy regarding introductions and the naturalization by decree of invasive species. As a result of these shared threats and differing policy standpoints, we assessed each species for feasibility of testing popular invasion hypotheses, depending on their invasion status, country of origin, and previous research completed. We did the same for management practice developments to highlight where the Global South may find collaborative opportunities to solve problems within their own context. In a similar manner, we also assessed each for evidence as to whether they are shared conflict species, and such might pose a threat to biodiversity, but are likely protected or favored in policy and by stakeholders. This presented the usual suspects of common carp, largemouth bass, and rainbow trout, with the emerging African origin conflict species of Nile tilapia and African sharp-toothed catfish. We would recommend research to focus on these species to avoid further development of wicked problems in management. I want to thank the whole workshop team and acknowledge funding from the CIB and the DSI NRF-SAIAB Chair Grant to the late Professor Bile, which facilitated this work. Thank you very much.